Okay, I think what we were talking about in the meeting that we've just had was the importance of conducting conversations with each other about what we're actually doing in organizational life, rather than having highly formal conversations in which we go off to the future, which we idealize, and then imagine that we're going to be able to bring that about. So what we've been talking about was more ordinary conversations about what we're actually doing in ordinary everyday life in the organizations that we work in. People at the meeting we've just had were very interested in this, but one of the participants said, the problem is we don't have time to have this kind of discussion. And the reason, and she was saying that it's become a lot worse, and the reason is that there's so many different things that need to be done now, so many initiatives that have to be taken, that having a conversation about what we're actually doing comes at the bottom of the list. So I guess I was trying to point out, I agreed entirely with what she was saying. There are increasing numbers of initiatives that managers have to deal with, and they do regard talking about how they do what they're actually doing and how they're thinking about it. They do regard that as at the bottom of the priority list. And what I was suggesting was that there was a need to reprioritize the things that we feel we absolutely must do, and that trying to make sense of what we're doing surely has to be quite high on the list. Otherwise, we just keep repeating what we're already doing, even if it's not working, because we don't inquire into why it's not working or what it actually is. And for me then, the way to do this is to ask together what initiatives we can drop, which are the ones we can delay, postpone, and hopefully never do. So that basically was a discussion. And I was giving some examples of managers that I was working with who were trying to do this. And what was striking in their attempts to identify initiatives they could drop was how as soon as somebody suggested dropping something, others would say, no, it's absolutely essential. So in effect what became clear is that although they say they're having all these initiatives forced upon them, it's actually they who are forcing themselves to follow them. And when they realized that, because they could see that that was the case, they began to have a serious discussion about which initiatives to drop and why certain ones could be dropped. And they did end up coming up with a list of things that they would postpone in order to free them up to do other things and to relieve them of the stress that modern day work in organizations brings. A stress which is making people ill. And the compulsion they feel to do all this stuff when it's they who are compelling themselves. So that was really the point.
So that kind of talk that they had, the managers, would also be that the talk that you say is when you encourage people to have more awareness of what they're doing. So that's a part of that dialogue.
Yes, exactly.
Actually stopping things or delaying things.
Exactly. So it was the fact that they were having the kind of conversation I'm talking about, in which they were exploring what it is they're actually doing, that it became, and it was only when one of them said, I actually feel I'm going to become ill with all this pressure, that I then said, well then that's what you need to talk about. Yeah, so that's exactly the kind of conversation that I'm talking about.
Are they practicing? No, not practicing, but are they showing practical judgment doing that? Is that also connected to this?
Yes, I think
to see what can we actually.
Yeah, I think so. So
Okay.
they did formulate a few criteria that would enable them to drop certain project
Yes.
initiatives.
Yeah.
But I would say that that's an exercise in practical judgment.
Okay.
They were able, based on their experience, to say we can drop initiatives that have characteristics A, B, and C. And that wasn't the result of some kind of very rational analysis. It was their judgment based on their experience that the central things to do were M, N, and O, and we could get rid of
some of the other stuff.
So of course this practical judgment is an issue that we were talking about a lot today.
Okay. So that's being in the present, looking at what demands or tasks do we have actually engage in, rather than being in the future.
Yeah.
Just seeing what we're doing. That's the way to go about bringing more awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.